Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining our third episode of Customer Service Game Changers. It's a series where I chat with leaders who set a new bar in the industry. And the goal is for you to learn from them and then deliver amazing customer service and just stand out from the crowd. I'm excited to speak today with Alfred Lin. And Alfred, I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about your background, including your current role at Sequoia and your past role at Zappos.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am Alfred Lin. I'm a partner at Sequoia Capital. I've been there for about 13 years. We help the daring build legendary companies from idea to IPO and beyond. And I am very fortunate to represent Sequoia on the boards of Airbnb, DoorDash, Citadel Securities, and many more. And previous to that, I was the chief operating officer at Zappos, and we pioneered a lot of the things that you want to talk about today related to customer service.
Well, thanks so much for spending time with me today. Just for everyone to know, I'll ask a few questions. There will be a rapid fire, and then if we have time, I'll take one or two questions from the comments that will be made in the chat, so don't hesitate to ask any question you have. Let's dig in. We all know that Zappos is well known for having set a new bar in customer service. I think Zappos actually still describes themselves as a customer service company that happens to sell shoes, handbags, clothing, and more. I'm just curious, where did the decision to have such great service come from, and what was its impact?
So originally, the Zappos's original idea was just to be completely a drop shipping lead gen website where we knew how to sort of get customers to a website and then pass them off to a brand that would fulfill and send them shoes. And we learned that that was actually quite difficult back then, and there were different levels of service. And we were also forced to have to buy some inventory from some brands because they didn't trust us. And so we took on more and more inventory, and we noticed that the customers that we provided good customer service to just bought more, retained better. And we didn't have a lot of money to spend on marketing. And then we learned that the best way to grow the business was to keep your customers that have already bought from you. So the cheapest form of retention marketing we learned was customer service. And so then we pivoted the company from the world's largest website, the web's largest shoe store, to the world's largest shoe store, to being powered by service, and a service company that just happens to sell shoes, handbags, clothing, and more.
And what did you see the impact be? Did you see it on metrics, on retention, repeat customers, team morale, all of it?
Well, very simply put, I think it affects a lot of the things that you talked about. But the thing that we noticed was that when we provide great customer service, we had high CSAT scores or NPS scores, which then led to higher retention. And it is rare that a company has 80% of a growing company, not a sort of flat company that, sort of a growing company. When I left Zappos, 80% on any given day, 80% of the sales came from repeat customers. And so, and it continued to grow. So the customers that we retain also kept continuing to buy more. The number one reason that new customers found out about Zappos was word of mouth. So
Yep.
not any form of marketing spend, but word of mouth. And if you sort of apply those two, customer service is the best form of retention marketing, and word of mouth, which is also because of providing great service, is the best form of new customer acquisition. That just completely halved the amount of money we needed to spend on marketing in general.
Amazing. One of my beliefs is that customer service is not the responsibility of solely customer service team or the customer support team. It's a shared company-wide initiative. At least at front, like there are many things we do. For example, everyone jumps in the support queue from time to time, and other initiatives. I'm curious if you feel like at Zappos it was a company-wide initiative, or it was like really just the customer service team was doing an outstanding job. And if it was more than customer service, like what was the impact of other teams on delivering great service to your customers?
Yeah, very early on, since we didn't have a customer service team, everybody answered the phone or answered email and answered customer questions. And so the phone would just auto ring around the office, and whoever it would just ring everybody's phone back when people had phones on their desks. And so everybody was involved in customer service, and we institutionalized that. And what we did was anybody who was hired, what would happen is you would start by first going to learning about Zappos and its culture, and then you would learn about what we do for customer service, and then you would actually get on the phones and answer questions from our customers. And then we would send you to our distribution center, and you would pick, pack, and ship process returns for our customers. So if you were an engineer or a lawyer or an accountant, you still did all these things, and you actually knew the guts of the business before you started your full-time job. It sounds like a very, very expensive investment, and it actually is very expensive. But we had a common understanding of how things worked at Zappos, which made things super efficient in terms of communicating what we do for customers. And I think that I thought that initially that was the dollars that we'd spend on this was a very expensive investment, but it turned out to be one of the best investments we've ever made at Zappos.
And when you say it this way, it seems like a no-brainer to invest in service just because you have more repeat customers, more word of mouth, so more new customers. You work with many other companies today at Sequoia. What have you seen being the reason why some companies don't invest in customer service as much as they should?
So I think what they may not understand is so one thing that I would sort of pop up a level is what is your customer experience? And what the customer experience is product, it's the service that you deliver, and the service when something goes wrong. And I think it's the last part that a lot of companies don't think about, especially in technology companies. They think primarily if I just fix the product and the service and there's no defects, then I should be good. And so trying to have no defects is a good thing for the product and engineering team to do. And then when you have defects, you need to recover. One of the most interesting sort of analysis we did was our most raving fans and our highest retained customers were actually customers that we screwed something up for them, and we turned them around. And it's kind of like any story, the hero's journey. You start thinking, oh, Zappos is great. And then something goes wrong. You're upset at Zappos. Do we turn things around for you, or do we just let you be upset about it? And in our opinion, you don't let the customer ever be upset. You want to turn them around, and then they become a raving fan for you. They spread word of mouth. They have that story to tell you when something goes wrong, Zappos will take care of you. And it's that feedback loop, I think, that people don't quite understand or they miss about how important customer service is.
And when you were COO at Zappos, what did you have to do concretely as the CEO to make sure that you created, like, I think you talked about the culture of wow, like what did you concretely have to do either on a daily basis or weekly basis with a company?
Well, I do think it starts with culture, and delivering wow through service was our first core value. And we just made sure that everybody understood how we deliver wow. One of the things we measured was how often a customer says wow. And we measure that. And so a lot of people measure output metrics, whether it's NPS or a CSAT, and it's very important to measure outputs. But I think it's also very important to measure inputs. And you got to decide what inputs you want to measure. They're the standard inputs that people measure, such as response rate or and how quickly you respond to a customer. There's so many ways to sort of think about your input metrics. The thing that we did was to measure wow and share why the customer said wow. The other thing that I think we really highly recommend people do is measure your first contact resolution rate. So if the customer has to call back multiple times or be transferred to multiple people, then you're not really doing your job, and that's not a great experience. So we did something that was probably different than most contact centers, which is to train people to be generalists. They should know everything. Part of the reason we trained everybody on how to do everything in our call center and our distribution center is because we want them to be generalists and to be able to answer any customer's question or problem. And if you can do that, then your first contact resolution just goes up. Another thing that we did was not just measure, but have context. And what I think a lot of people do very well is just manage through metrics, but you also want to manage through context. And one of the reports that we would have is each team at the beginning of the day would get together, a team of 10, the lead would ask around, what did we learn from yesterday? What did we do extremely well? What did we do poorly? How can we improve on the things that we do poorly? Everybody would go around and share the lessons in the group of 10. The lead would summarize it, send it to their manager. The manager would then have 10 of these and then summarize that and attach everything and send it to the director. The director would have 10 of these and then summarize that and then send it up to the VP. And then the VP would summarize that and send all that context to the whole company. That is a context report of what happened yesterday with information that is much richer. And it does need to be summarized, much richer than any metric can tell you. And I think lots of people don't want to go into the weeds and they don't want to listen to calls. Tony Hsieh would used to just randomly sample calls and hear the calls every now and then, whenever he had time, in between meetings, randomly survey emails. And that is the type of thing that you will then get context and have a feel of what's going on in the contact center. In some sense, being virtual makes it really hard. When people had a physical store, they can walk around, they can interact with customers. We never thought that was in the weeds. I mean, it was just the thing you did. And we lose that now because everything is virtual. So then we resort to things like just pure measurement. Measurement is very, very important, but you also want to get the context. The other thing I would say about the context is if you want to do this well, you take that context and you feed it back into your product or your service experience. And many of the best ideas that we got on product and services were from customers that usually died in the conversation because you never got the context from the conversation because all you did was measure metrics.
It's interesting. So I think 2 weeks ago, I was on with Parker Conrad at Rippling, and he shared something very similar, which is like the data is very important, and they measure all the things you talked about, CSAT, response time, etc. But the anecdata is just as important. And I think there is something very powerful about having the context. I think there is also something very powerful about leadership showing that they care. So I really liked hearing that, you know, the leadership would listen to some sample calls. I think it just showed the company that it is like the most important thing all of us can work on. I'm curious, today you have a different job, and part of your job is to choose which companies you're going to invest in. Do you feel like how well they deal with customer service and how well they treat their customers is one of the criteria you use to choose to invest in a company or not invest?
I think it's critically important for consumer companies, for PLG companies, and more it's become true for enterprise companies as well. And I think it's customer service, I would take it up a level. How obsessed are you with the customer? Customer service is a way to be obsessed. Customer experience is a way to be obsessed. But if you really obsess about the full customer journey, you do things such as what Airbnb would do, which is a storyboard the customer's life, the whole life of a guest and a host, and have all the sort of interactions that they might have with you. DoorDash do very similar things where they take the journey of the customer, whether it's the customer, the merchant, or the driver, and they break down their tasks into smaller and smaller bite-sized pieces that can be solved in repeatable ways. That's the level of obsession that makes companies like DoorDash and Airbnb super successful. And when things go wrong, these companies are super interested in why it goes wrong and trying to fix that. One of the things that I learned at Zappos and I've written about is like analyzing data at the extremes. And Parker talked about this. He measures what happens, what goes wrong at the 90th percentile. I think it's actually very interesting to sort of look at that, but also look at what goes really right when things go right and just compare and contrast. Why do you have customers that have those such different experiences and be obsessed about trying to move customers all the way from the worst to the best customers? And in some sense, we generally have this idea that we want to treat our best customers better than anybody else. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are a fast growing company, at some point you will run out of A customers. So I used to have this like graphs like, oh, you want to treat all the A customers better. So you want to give them better service. You want to give them more discounts, et cetera, et cetera. How many A customers do you think you have in the world? And you get to a certain scale like Zappos and you're going to run out of A customers that you can target. So then how do you move your B customers to A customers, your C customers to B customers, your D customers to C customers, et cetera? And I think that's also a very important thing to have in the culture of the company.
Yeah. I really love that. I'm curious. I mean, I think a lot of us are listening and probably are measuring, the bottom 10% of things that go wrong, but then don't look at the top 1%, as you said. I think it's fascinating. I'm curious, by measuring this, is there anything you've learned on what really made the top 1% be in the top 1% and any best practices you have for customer service leaders that want to wow their customers even more?
Yeah, so I think the easy thing to say is the best customer experience, everything just went right. You answered the phone call very quickly. You knew how to answer their problem, and everything was just fine. Um, I think what we learned was that an element that was very, very important in the truly best experience was showing that you really care. And that is just hard to replicate. And so hiring people that care is probably your most important job. And you do that, you would do that for hiring an engineering or a product. Do the same thing in customer service. Hire people who care. And in some sense, hiring people who are very interested in providing great service is important. And one of the interview questions that we used to have for people who were applying for a customer service position was, when was the last time you noticed it of great customer service and why? And so being able to sort of articulate why someone gave you great customer service means that you care, you notice these things, you're more likely to give higher levels of service. That question got posted on the web, so everybody came prepared. So we asked the opposite questions. When was the last time you received bad customer service? And what would you have done differently? And most people can answer the first part. We always want to complain about that customer service, but what would you have done differently? You're the owner of the company now. What would you have done differently? And it's not that easy to answer because there's a long line, they have to rush you. You then suddenly think about, okay, what would I have done differently to make you feel special? A simple thank you would help. I'm sorry that this long line is so long, but I want to, treat you well and all my other customers well. Just being authentic is very, very hard to reproduce.
I love this. I want to ask you so many more questions, but I want to make sure that we don't miss one of the things that's being asked the most. AI is disrupting the customer service industry. I think AI is disrupting a lot of industries, but for sure, the customer service is one of them. I'm curious, what is your take? Like, what is your prediction on what AI is actually going to change for customer service and not going to change this year?
I think I'll give you the sort of the patent answer, which is a lot's going to change and a lot's not going to change. And the reason I say that is a lot of technologies have come along in customer service, and we've done things to improve all sorts of metrics and automate things. And I think AI has a tremendous ability to automate a lot of things. The report that I just told you about, the summarization report, it'll be auto-generated. We don't need people to like sort of talk to each other and then type it up and then send it up to from the lead to the supervisor, from the supervisor to that could all get summarized. It can get all sent out automatically. Everybody would have the context. There would be, this is so great. You have to use it. You have to use it for improving your experience. And I think that what would lead back to improving your customer experience will be valuable. When you have all that data now, it can get summarized. You should then feed it back into the product experience. And I don't know if enough people are talking about that. We just funded a company called Sierra that Brett Taylor started. And his idea is to take AI and not just answer a customer service request, but feed it back into the product experience.
I'm curious if, if I was a founder and you were the partner I work with at Sequoia, and then I realized my CSAT is dropping, just customer service isn't good, bad reviews, and I'm telling you, like, hey, Alfred, like, what's your advice to me? Like, I'm not proud of where customer service is. Like, what should I do? There are just so many things I could be doing, from, hiring a new leader, implementing a new tool, like rethinking the entire customer journey. Like, where should I start?
Well, I think that it's always important to diagnose the first order issues and the root cause of why the CSAT is dropping. And CSAT's dropping, it's usually customer service almost always gets blamed, but it could be a product issue. It could be a lack of leadership. But so depending on what the first order issue is, what the root cause of why it's dropping, I would tell you different things. If it's the leadership is uninspiring and all your reps are unhappy and that's the reason, then you need to find a new leader. If you did something in the product and it causes the CSAT to go down, go fix the product. I guess the way I answer that is think from first principles what the first order issue is.
Great. I want to do a quick rapid fire questions, so just answer fast. What's the best quality in a leader?
Being able to hold two opposite ideas and make sense of it.
Interesting. What's the one piece of advice you'd give all leaders when it comes to customer service?
That it's important.
Agreed. Is agree that it's important. Like, all the companies you work with have amazing customer service?
I think they all care about the customer experience.
Great. Okay, third question. What sectors are you most excited about right now?
How AI is going to change the consumer experience.
Makes sense. What companies are truly leading with customer service right now?
I think there are a lot. I think DoorDash, Airbnb, are two examples. I think there are many.
Great. And
Even Southwest and airline industry, where everybody complains about the airline industry. I just think that what's the most important thing, there are a lot more than you might think. You just go into any industry, there are leaders and they do things differently. One of the things I would say is think about your brand of customer service and why is it differentiated. You don't want to just be better on these metrics. You want to be different and better. And your difference is what will make you better, is the way sort of I think about it. Southwest just operates their airline differently than everybody else. Zappos operated an e-commerce company differently than everybody else. That's my encouragement to people.
Last question, and then I'll take a question from the audience. Who do you think should be our next guest?
Brett Taylor.
Great. I'll make it happen. All right. One question from the audience was, how do you actually measure the wow factor? So do you put a number on it based on NPS, CSAT, contextual info? And how do you know that it's improving?
We didn't, so we thought about that question very hard because you're right, like you could have a wow experience, and so how do you measure it? And we just did the simple thing. When does the customer actually say wow? On the call, they said wow. On the email, they said wow, thank you. If they said that, we count it as 1. And if they didn't say that, it's a 0.
Great. Well, I think this is something that everyone can start implementing tomorrow.
And you can get more sophisticated over time and measure the quality of the interaction, et cetera. But just say, just measuring that is so simple. One of the things about metrics, start and over time, perfected over time, but you should just start with the simple thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And someone just said, wow, in the chat, which means you did an incredible job today, Alfred.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question. So I think you've been at Sequoia for 13 years. So, like, some years have passed since you were at Zappos. Do you feel like what the customer service, either expectations or trends, like, have changed? Like, what's different today versus when you were obsessing over it, many years ago?
Well, I think that today people do understand it's important. And I think the question people struggle with is it worth the investment? And I think we can mathematically prove that it's worth the investment. So then you go through these stages. It's important. It's worth the investment. How do I do things differently? I think that part a lot of companies struggle with, because what they end up doing is do the same thing, measure the same metrics, try to compare themselves to their competition around customer service. And I would just encourage people, have a differentiated view of what customer service is. Um, our, our guiding light at Zappos was, we want to provide, so what is our term of a branded customer experience? If you asked us, for many companies, any call, any email is a defect in their process because something went wrong. And you can have that as your guiding light, but then what you do is you want to go fix the customer experience and make that perfect and have no interaction. Well, Zappos, we said, well, any interaction we have is an opportunity to create a branded experience for the customer. And if you think of it that way, then you're going to have just a different view of how you treat customers when they call you. They're not trying to rush them off the phone. We don't measure average handle time for that reason.
Yep.
Um,
One thing I was gonna say is you mentioned that you believe everyone agrees on the fact that delivering great customer service is important. As we work with over 8,000 companies that use Front to deliver great service, and one theme I hear is actually that sometimes it's hard to convince your boss that it's worth the investment. And so I don't actually know if everyone agrees on the fact that having great customer service is important. Like, customer service in many industries is seen as a cost center. We're in an environment where everyone is trying to, reduce costs. So I'm curious, if you're a customer service leader, what would you say to your, manager to explain why it's important and to prove the ROI of investing in customer service?
so so I think maybe I should rephrase what I said. No company says I want to have bad customer service, right? So
Agree.
they all want good customer service. Then the question is it worth the investment, to your point? And
Yep.
I mean, we should all just look at the numbers. Like, how much does it cost you to acquire a customer? How much does it cost you to retain a customer? And how much does it cost to retain a customer that's upset at you, that's about to churn, they're calling you because they're basically giving you a warning. It's like, you should treat that complaint as a gift, because they're about to leave you because something went wrong. And if you don't want to treat them well, they're going to leave. How much does it cost you to have a churned customer? Just measure those things. If you measure those things, it will be incredibly obvious that it's an easier thing to keep a customer than to acquire a new one. And so I think the investment side is pretty straightforward if you want to do the math. Um,
Yep.
so that's where I would leave that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure the chat was really active. We couldn't get to every question, but we will have other episodes and answer some of these questions. So, Alfred, thank you so much
So,
for your wisdom.
so one more thing, I think this is
Yeah.
from Willamar. How do you manage to give a branded experience without having to scale the amount of people? I think people are surprised that Zappos's call center was not that much. It was less than it was somewhere between 2 to 3% of gross of sales. So it's not that much of an investment. Your engineering teams are more expensive. A lot of things are more expensive. I think when you're trying to say, well, it's 2 or 3%, why don't we just drop that to the bottom line? I think that's where measuring whether the investment is worth it or not is valuable.
I appreciate this. You just delivered amazing customer service by answering a question right from the chat, leading by example. Thank you, Alfred. I'm sure I'll
Thank
see you.
you. See you later. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.